The courtroom held its breath. Karoline leaned forward, voice steady but fierce. "Is this your signature or not?" Across from her, Pope Robert faltered, eyes flickering, lips tight. Millions were watching. This wasn't about faith or politics anymore. It was about truth. And in that moment, silence said everything. Karoline Leavitt rose fast, sharp-witted, media-trained, and unafraid to challenge sacred institutions. Critics called her reckless. Supporters called her fearless. Pope Robert commanded global respect. A spiritual icon, political influencer, untouchable for decades. But behind the robes and rhetoric stood a man used to control. And Karoline, she didn't kneel. It began with a hearing no one expected to matter. Officially, it was just a review, an oversight session on tax exemptions and nonprofit transparency. But when Karoline Leavitt took her seat at the long oak table, she wasn't there to review. She was there to expose. Across from her sat Pope Robert, invited not as a defendant, but as an expert, a guest. His reputation preceded him. Global humanitarian, religious leader, advisor to presidents. Cameras panned respectfully. Commentators praised his moral authority. But Karoline saw something else. She tapped her pen once, then again. The air was stiff with formalities until she spoke. "Pope Robert," she began, measured and polite. "Would you agree that no religious institution is above the law?" He gave a slow smile. "Of course, Congresswoman. We are all accountable." She nodded, turning a page in the binder before her. "Then you won't mind helping us clarify something." Her tone was calm, but sharp as ice. She slid a document across the table. "This letter," she said, "is dated 6 months ago. It shows direct donations from your U.S. nonprofit to several political action committees. Specifically, ones aligned with candidates your office later endorsed." The room stirred. Robert didn't blink. "I'm sure there's context," he replied smoothly. "Charitable organizations often support civic engagement." Karoline smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Page 2 lists travel reimbursements to political strategists. Page 3 shows coordinated messaging emails between your foundation and campaign managers. Would you call that civic engagement? His face didn't change, but his hands folded tighter. She kept going. "Nowhere in the public filings are these activities disclosed as political expenditures. That would violate IRS Code 501c3, wouldn't it?" He tried to respond, calmly, diplomatically, but Karoline was relentless. "Just answer the question," she said, interrupting his explanation. Tension spiked. C-SPAN's live chat exploded. Viewers across the country began recording. Clips hit Twitter before the hearing ended. He leaned into the microphone. "You're making dangerous insinuations, Congresswoman. And you're evading clear violations," she shot back. "We're not in a confessional, sir. This is Congress." Behind her, aides shifted. Even the chairman looked stunned. By the end of the hour, Robert's polished composure had cracked. Just slightly, but enough. Enough for the public to see. That evening, headlines were split. Leavitt grandstands before global faith leader. Karoline Leavitt dares to question the untouchable. But beneath the noise, something real had started. Not just a debate. A war. The next morning, America had picked a side. Stand with Robert and expose the faith trended simultaneously. News anchors scrambled to decode the hearing, while influencers reposted Karoline's interrogation like it was a courtroom drama. Podcasts, morning shows, political blogs, all asked the same thing. Had she gone too far or not far enough? Karoline didn't wait for the answer. Within 24 hours, she published a full dossier on her official website. Public records, tax filings, archived communications. A sleek timeline showed how donations flowed from Robert's charity to PACs under different names. Every page was sourced, every claim backed. Robert's defenders called it a smear campaign. His team fired back with a well-produced video, soft lighting, spiritual music. Robert seated calmly in front of a stained glass window. He called Karoline's accusations deeply misleading, meant to undermine faith-based service. The video garnered 5 million views in 12 hours. The comments were split between reverence and rage, but Karoline was already 2 moves ahead. A whistleblower, a former accountant from the church's financial division, stepped forward. In an anonymous interview on a primetime show, the voice was distorted, but the accusation was crystal clear. There's a shadow fund. It's designed to move money internationally with zero paper trail. Robert's camp denied everything, but momentum had shifted. Late-night comedians took sides. Parody songs mocked Karoline as a crusader with a grudge, while others hailed her as The conservative AOC. Memes of Robert wearing a crown labeled tax-free king spread like wildfire. Then came the subpoena. The Oversight Committee officially demanded financial documents from Robert's foundation. It wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was an investigation. Karoline's public image hardened. She wasn't just a congresswoman now. She was a cultural lightning rod. Protesters gathered outside her office, some holding signs quoting scripture, others chanting in support. Robert tried to maintain poise, giving a sermon that Sunday about forgiveness and false prophets. But clips from his homily were dissected online. His subtle jabs at Karoline only deepened suspicion. Then she dropped the email. A single screenshot. Dated. Verified. It showed a top aide in Robert's foundation coordinating with a campaign advisor to secure leverage with key votes. That was the phrase that lit the fuse. Even longtime supporters paused. The language didn't sound like faith. It sounded like strategy. Politics. A CNN panel hosted a tense debate between two former members of Robert's advisory board. One defended him fiercely, the other hesitated. "There are things," she said carefully, "we were never allowed to see." Karoline, meanwhile, refused interviews. She let the documents speak. But behind closed doors, her team planned the next wave. As Robert prepared to appear before the Oversight Committee for a second round, his advisors urged him to settle, to apologize, to retreat. He refused. He wasn't just fighting a legal threat. He was fighting to protect an empire. And Karoline, she was just getting started. Day 2 of testimony changed everything. The chamber was packed. Journalists, legal analysts, even international observers filled the gallery. Outside, protest lines stretched around the block. Signs clashed. Protect the church versus no one above the law. Security was tighter. Cameras were sharper. The stakes were higher. Karoline arrived first. Calm, focused, not a word wasted. She sat, organized her papers, and waited. When Pope Robert entered, the atmosphere shifted. Some stood, some didn't, but no one looked away. The chairman called the session to order. Questions began. At first, routine, predictable. Robert answered smoothly, deflecting with the same polished grace that built his global following. Then Karoline leaned forward. "I have a document," she said, voice level. "This comes from your office, dated January 3rd of this year. It instructs foundation staff to allocate emergency funds toward lobbying efforts in 5 battleground states." Robert's smile didn't flicker, but his fingers twitched. "That's incorrect," he replied. "We do not allocate emergency funds for political purposes." Karoline didn't raise her voice. "Would you like to read your signature at the bottom?" She passed the page to the clerk, who brought it forward. Robert stared at it for a long second. The room was completely still. "I don't recall signing this," he said finally. "Would you deny it's your handwriting?" Silence. Karoline glanced at the committee. "I move that this be entered into evidence." The chairman nodded. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Screenshots of the moment hit social media in real time. He hesitated. He cracked. "That's the look of a man caught." Then came the witness. A former senior coordinator from within Robert's global network appeared, sworn in privately for security reasons. On screen, her face was blurred, but her words were sharp. "We were told to direct funds through alternate vendors to avoid detection. It wasn't charity, it was strategy, and it came from the top." The room shifted again. Reporters scribbled. Lawyers whispered. Robert finally spoke. "This is a targeted political attack. A character assassination. There are people who fear what I represent." Karoline didn't blink. "Truth?" "No," he replied. "Change." The exchange was clipped and replayed everywhere. The phrase became a punchline on both sides of the aisle. The breaking point wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was slow, deliberate, and undeniable. That evening, 2 senators who had long backed Robert released cautious statements. Another major donor suspended funding. The foundation's stock portfolio dropped 6% overnight. The public didn't need a judge. They'd already decided. The unraveling came fast. A leaked recording surfaced. Robert, behind closed doors, speaking to senior staff. The voice was unmistakable, calm, confident, and damning. "They'll never touch us. The law bends to influence. And influence, we own it." The clip spread like wildfire. News stations cut their regular programming. Analysts didn't speculate. They quoted. Even his staunchest allies struggled to defend it. Karoline released a one-line statement. "Some men hide behind faith. Others weaponize it." Robert's public appearances were canceled. Scheduled sermons, conferences, global summits, suddenly off the calendar. Donations froze. Board members began resigning one by one. Then the IRS confirmed an open investigation. Journalists flooded past associates, ex-employees, anyone who might talk. Some did, and each voice added to the collapse. Patterns of private jets labeled as humanitarian trips, luxury real estate acquisitions under dummy nonprofits, inflated travel reimbursements. Karoline didn't gloat. She didn't smile for the cameras. She stood on the Capitol steps and said, "We aren't against faith, we're against fraud." It was simple. It was devastating. 1 week later, Robert appeared in a pre-recorded address. No podium, no ornate background, just a plain room, a wooden chair, and a tired face. "I've made errors in oversight," he said, "and I will step away for reflection, for accountability." No one clapped. No one cheered. It wasn't a speech. It was a retreat. Karoline watched it from her office. Her team waited for a reaction. She said nothing, just closed the laptop and turned toward the window. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about showing the country who had been untouchable for too long. Just when the nation thought the story had ended, another document surfaced. This time it wasn't leaked by Karoline's team or a federal agency. It came from Robert himself. A private letter, handwritten and dated weeks before the hearing began. It was addressed to Karoline. In it, he acknowledged internal concerns. He spoke of pressures, of legacy, of navigating a world where spiritual leadership collided with political power. Most striking of all, he offered to meet her. Off the record. No cameras, no headlines, just a conversation. Karoline had received the letter. She never responded. The revelation spread fast. Some called it manipulation. Others saw it as proof that Robert had tried to end the conflict before it escalated. Karoline was asked about the letter during a live town hall. She paused, then said simply, "I read it, but I believe the truth needed to come out publicly, not behind closed doors." The audience clapped, but not everyone cheered. For the first time, her certainty appeared touched by reflection. Was there a different path she could have taken? Had she exposed corruption, or had she destroyed a man? Online debates flared. New headlines emerged. The letter that might have changed everything. Too late for grace? Karoline didn't apologize. She didn't backtrack. But the moment shifted something deeper than politics. It introduced complexity. She hadn't just taken down a man. She had forced the country to confront a question no one wanted to answer. What do we do when virtue and power collide? And neither is pure. The resignation made headlines, but the consequences ran deeper. Robert's foundation lost over half its donors in the first month. International branches distanced themselves, issuing separate statements. Investigations expanded, not just in the US, but in Europe and South America. Religious institutions worldwide scrambled to review their financial records. Karoline was hailed as a hero in conservative circles. Her approval ratings surged. Cable news dubbed her the Disruptor. But the praise came with pressure. Supporters wanted more hearings, more targets, more victories. She didn't rush. Instead, she gave one quiet interview. No theatrics, no sound bites, just a calm voice saying, "I didn't do this to win. I did it because no one else would." That clip went viral, but not everyone applauded. Protests continued outside her office. Faith leaders accused her of fueling division. Editorials warned that dragging religious figures into political fights set a dangerous precedent. Meanwhile, Robert disappeared from public life. No new statements, no appearances, only rumors. A retreat in Italy, a monastery in Spain. Some said he was writing a memoir. Others claimed he was negotiating legal immunity in exchange for cooperation. What couldn't be denied was this: America had changed. Faith, power, and accountability could no longer exist in separate lanes. They had collided on live television, and the impact left cracks across every institution. Karoline knew those cracks wouldn't heal quickly, but for the first time, they were visible. This was never just about one man. It was about the illusion of untouchable power, and what happens when someone finally says no. Karoline didn't destroy faith. She demanded truth, and truth always leaves a mark. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe, because more are coming.